This Kase 200mm f5.6 Reflex is a really compact telephoto lens. It is not too expensive, but it has very solid build quality, and the image shot with this lens looks really unique. It doesn't really add too much space or weight to your camera bag, but it can give you 200mm focal length reach. So, should you add it to your camera bag? Let's find out in this review. Good morning everyone, Richard here, welcome back to the channel. So today we are looking at this Kase 200mm f5.6 Reflex mirror lens. But before we start, I want to tell you this lens sample I used for the review was sent to me by Kase. I do not need to return the sample after this review, but I also do not receive any money for this review. So just like all the other review video on this channel, everything I'm going to say are completely my thoughts. And if you live in New Zealand and interested in this lens after watching this review, please go see my friends at Photo Warehouse as they do carry this Kase 200mm f5.6 Reflex lens. This lens is a completely mechanical lens. There's no electronic contacts, there's no autofocus or any other electronic features. So if your camera has in-body image stabilizer, then you need to manually enter the focal length on the camera for the eyeballs to work correctly when you're shooting with this lens. The body of this lens is completely made of metal. It feels really solid. The lens has a very clean, modern style design, so it is quite opposite to the TTArtisan 250mm reflex lens that we looked at recently, which has a more retro style design. It is a full frame lens and it is available for pretty much all the common mirrorless lens mount in the market. If you are a L mount or micro four thirds shooter, then you could just get the Canon EF mount version and use an adapter so that you can use it on your camera as well. All the different versions has the exact same optics design. The sample Kase sent me is for the Sony E mount, and I'm going to test it on my 61MP Sony a7CR, so it will really test the lens optical quality. The size of this lens is really compact, and even though it is made of metal, the weight is only approximately 0.5 kg, which is not bad for a 200mm lens. There is a removable lens hood, which is not very deep, but at least it is deeper than the one for the TTArtisan 250mm reflex lens. The filter size is 67mm. The front lens cap can be attached to the lens hood or directly attached to the lens if the lens hood is not installed. Focus flow is about 180 degrees, and I found the focus ring very smooth. Feels very satisfying when you are turning the focus ring. And let's have a look at the lens image quality, and we'll start with the image sharpness. If you look at the center is very sharp. I can see all the details and I'm definitely very impressed by the sharpness of this lens. Since this is a manual focus lens, so the sharpness really depends on whether you can nail the focus or not. But with the help of focus peaking and magnification, I found it is pretty easy to nail the focus, and that will give me excellent image sharpness. If you look at the corner, I'm also very impressed by the lens corner sharpness. I don't even have to refocus at the corner, and the corner sharpness is already excellent. That means the lens has very little field curvature. I did a bit of comparison with the TTArtisan 250mm reflex lens. Since the focal length of the TTArtisan is a little bit longer, so I have to move my tripod back a few meters to get similar composition. So if we compare the center sharpness, TTArtisan isn't bad, but I think the Kase is slightly better, but only very slightly. And if we look at the corner, as I mentioned in the TTArtisan review, the corner of the TTArtisan is a bit soft. If we now compare it with the Kase corner sharpness is just much better. The minimum focus distance of this Kase lens is 2 meters, and the maximum magnification is 0.11 times, which is not bad. When shooting at the minimum focus distance, the sharpness is also very decent. Mirrorless has a very special optics design which allows the lens to be a lot smaller than a typical telephoto lens with the same focal length. And also because of this special design, it renders the bokeh in a very unusual donut shape. So because of the very unusual shape bokeh is something that you either love or hate. If you hate this bokeh, then don't get a mirror lens because you won't like the photo shot with this lens at all. With the 200mm focal length and the fixed f5.6 aperture, it's really easy to dissolve the background into bokeh, so you will get lots of donut bokeh when you are shooting with this Kase lens. If we look at this test photo, you can see the lens has some quite noticeable vignetting, definitely more than what I expected. It's also more than the TTArtisan 250mm reflex lens. Even when I look at my real-world photo that I shot with this Kase lens, I can also see quite a bit of dark corner. If the background is plain color, then the vignetting effect can be quite noticeable. Chromatic Aberration performance is excellent with this Kase lens. I see almost no color fringing at all when I go through all the photos that I shot with this lens. Even with some of the really high contrast photo, there still isn't much color fringing at all, so the lens Chromatic Aberration performance is really excellent. This lens also has very minimal amount of distortion, maybe just a tiny bit of pincushion distortion, but the amount is so small that I don't think it really matters at all when you are shooting real-world photos. When there is a strong light source in front of the camera, this Kase lens can suffer from lens flare. Not only you can see the lens flare, but the contrast would also drop quite a bit as well. When I compared it with the TTArtisan lens, the Kase lens seems to be slightly better, but I will still avoid shooting directly into a bright light source unless you want to use the lens flare to add some character to your photo. Because the aperture is fixed at f5.6, so you cannot render any Sunstars at all when you are shooting with this Kase 200mm lens. If you are planning to use this lens to shoot some video, this lens has quite a bit of focus breathing. This is not really surprising as all the mirror reflex lenses that I've used before all have very noticeable focus breathing. It is quite interesting to review this Kase 200mm f5.6 lens. In some way, we can say it doesn't really make sense to buy a lens like this, as it's missing autofocus and a lot of other features, so it's not exactly easy to shoot with this lens. It's definitely not as flexible as, say, a 70 to 300mm zoom lens, which may be only a little bit more expensive, but those telephoto lenses are definitely a lot easier to use and a lot more flexible compared to this Kase lens. So if your priority is easy to use, then this lens is not for you. I feel this Kase 200mm f5.6 reflex is for photographers who enjoy the manual shooting experience. You turn the focus ring and see the subject change from blurry to sharp, and you see the background bokeh turn into donut shape. You will have the challenge of having a fixed aperture and not exactly great lens flare performance, but this is also what I think is great about this lens. To me, shooting with the modern mirrorless cameras and the latest lenses are just getting too easy sometimes, and I would say it can be quite boring. You just point and click the shutter button and you can immediately get a technically perfect photo. So I feel sometimes if you shoot with a manual focus lens like this Kase 200mm f5.6, it would bring back some of the challenges, it will slow you down, but it would also give you some very special, rewarding feeling when you manage to take some nice photos. In terms of image quality, this Kase lens is very good. It's very sharp from center all the way to the corner, very minimal distortion, chromatic aberration. The only area that it doesn't do very well is lens flare, but it is a common weakness for pretty much all the mirror lenses in the market, at least all the ones that I have tried myself. Now, if you're interested in this lens, then you may have the question, why should I buy this lens instead of the TTArtisan or the Kase mirror reflex lens? This case is quite a bit more expensive than the other two lenses. Well, I haven't got a chance to use the Kase lens, so I can't really comment too much about that lens. But if I compare this lens with the TTArtisan, I think the overall image quality of the case is better. It is a little bit sharper, and the lens flare control seems to be a little bit better as well. There is not a huge difference between these two lenses, but the case seems to be a little bit better overall, maybe apart from Vignetting, which the TTArtisan is better. So should we pay extra money to get the case instead of the TTArtisan? I think if you want the best image quality, then I think the answer is yes. But if you want better value for money, then TTArtisan may be the better choice. Another thing I noticed is that it seems to be a bit easier to shoot with this case lens, especially when I'm shooting on the streets. TTArtisan has a longer 250mm focal length, which is great if you want to shoot things that is really far away, as it gives you a little bit more reach. But for general use, like when I just walk around in the city or even when I go to a park, the shorter 200mm focal length just seems to be a bit more user-friendly. You still have to focus very carefully, but I seems to be able to find my target and focus on my target a little bit quicker, and also I will have better keep rate. I also don't have to stand really far away when I want to take some portrait photos. So if you think you want to use the lens to shoot more general purpose photos, then the case would be a better choice. So anyway, what do you guys think about this Kase 200mm f5.6 reflex lens? Is this a lens that you will be interested in? Have you got any similar mirror reflex lens? Let me know your thoughts and I can have some more discussions with you in the comments section below.